This is the Forbes Books Podcast, conversations with amazing humans who are impacting the world of business and beyond. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this week I've got Will Jones in the studio. Will is president and CEO of Thompson Child and Family Focus, a leading nonprofit providing clinical and prevention services for children across the Carolinas. Will's a true champion, transforming lives and communities for children and families in need. Hey, Will, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So I want to go way back. In your profession, you started in sort of like your bag in 1994. So you were basically a kid. So I want to know what the brain of a person like yourself was to pursue a career like this so early on. Because I know a lot of people in your field I'm sure you hear this, I kind of stumbled into this. But you were so young, you didn't really stumble into this. So tell me how it all started.
Well, actually, you took the words out of my mouth.
You did stumble.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
So I was waiting to get into a master's degree program in human services, and I was engaged to be married at that time as a 21-year-old. Just graduated from college, and I was looking for jobs, working where I could apply my degree.
Yeah.
And ended up applying for a job with the county, Orange County in Orlando, working with at-risk youth, juvenile justice youth, and I actually missed the meeting.
Were you stuck at Disney World or something?
No, honestly, I had a shitty car. And the car broke down on the way to the interview. I just didn't have the wherewithal, and I was a little embarrassed. I didn't even call him. I just no-showed.
Wow.
Which is kind of classy. It's normal now. Yeah. Back then, it wasn't normal. You just didn't no-call, no-show. I just, no-show. The job paid $7.07 an hour, so I really didn't care that.
Right.
And 2 days later, they called me and said, hey, not sure what happened, but we want to bring you back in for an interview. And I just felt like, okay, that must be a sign of some sort.
Yeah.
And I went in and interviewed, working at a runaway and homeless youth shelter. Again, that was going to be a short stint. I was looking to get into federal law enforcement at the time, waiting to get in one of the academies. I was engaged and married. And I was waiting to see if I got accepted to my master's degree program at the University of Central Florida. I ended up getting married, ended up getting the master's degree program, got accepted to the U.S. Border Patrol Academy, and I got this job making $7.07 an hour, and I decided against the academy to pursue my master's degree, and thought that working in the social service sector was probably a little bit of a short-term thing. Maybe I'd go into law enforcement later. And now it's 31 years. I've been in the service industry, but even more so is what's happening in my childhood. Have you ever heard of adverse childhood experiences? Yeah. My dad was in the military. We lived in England when I was 6. My parents got separated and divorced. When I was in Europe, my dad thought it would be better opportunities for me and my sister to come to the States with him. So we basically left my mom behind at the age of 6 and 7.
Wow. And
that was probably my first adverse childhood experience. One is seeing your parents fight, and then leaving your mom behind in another country. And then I lived with my grandparents about an hour away from my dad was working at the time. And again, my dad was never around. So kind of 2 or 3 adverse childhood experiences right off the bat. As a second grader, and I started to try to protect myself through probably being a little bit of a wise ass, and it turned into a little bit of a bully. And I was struggling. I was traumatized in a lot of different ways. Anyway, several people helped me, including a school guidance counselor, coaches, parents of friends and teammates, and just helped me build resiliency. And long story short, my dad came around, got remarried. I had a stable stepmom in my life, but my mom has never been a stable force. So I feel like I was called into the world.
Wow. And so you're a couple years in, you feel like this is your track. What is it? Just give us some insight in terms of your sort of like career development and like what steps would you take to grow? Like, I mean, obviously you grew as a leader, but like, how does that work? Because I think we all know the corporate structure of like, you're a corporate drone, then you're a SVP, then you're, So how does it work in your industry?
I think it's the same as every industry. Yeah. Just you show up, you show up on time, you show up ready, you show up and try to be a good teammate. Be an impact player wherever you are. Add value even above and beyond what's in the job description. Personally, I hate job descriptions. I'm not big on when employees mention them.
Yeah.
I like the last bullet on the job description. All other duties aside. And I think that's where you hang out. If you can hang out there and you could really learn to add value. And really, quite frankly, that's where I'm at in my career. I just want to add value. whether it be in this conversation, whether it be meeting somebody tomorrow, whether it be in the workforce, family, if you can just bring value to bear, good things happen. Never asked for a promotion, never asked for a raise in my entire career. Got many promotions and many raises because I just showed up and I added value.
Wow. And let's talk about the 30 years. What's different about the kids now? Here in 2024, 30 years later, I mean, is it, we like to say as much things change, they stay the same. But is it the same? Is it different?
You know, for me as the CEO of our organization, somebody's led at a senior level for a long time, I'm so far really removed from the clients that we serve. And so a lot of times, tell me about the kids. I'm thinking about what employees are we talking about?
Yeah.
But understanding the children that we're serving are dealing with so much more than they've ever. The pandemic was literally pulling back of the curtain of all what was going on wrong in the world and the social dilemma, specifically in Charlotte, where I live. And most of our work is, not all of it, but most of it. But Charlotte's no different than Charleston. Charleston's no different than Tampa. There's a lot of need and a lot of unmet need all around us.
And so who are these kids? Like, who are the kids that you're helping in your organization that, you know, how do they come to you? Like, it's not like, you know, it's like, I was very fortunate. I had a very normal childhood. My parents actually stayed married, which I remember I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm old enough to remember after school specials of watching, you know, stories about divorces. And every time my mom and dad would get in a fight, I'd cry because I think, oh my God, they're going to divorce. Not that divorce is the worst thing, but as an 80s kid, it's like, it was a little more taboo than it is today. So I was very fortunate. So it's hard for me to, you know, I feel sympathy and empathy for all these people that go through, but I just I don't even know how it happens, what's going on in this world. But tell me about these.
Yeah, the children we serve are a little bit different. So I'll just mention in Charlotte, 1 out of every 5 children in Charlotte is born into poverty.
Wow.
And there's also a data set there. And again, a lot of this holds true in all urban areas, especially fast-growing urban areas. Mm-hmm. There's a 90% chance of staying in poverty if you're born in poverty.
All right.
Now, I'm not talking about as a kid. I'm talking about an adult through your life. And so those are the families and the children that we're touching at Thompson. We're going at those with highest likelihood of negative life outcomes without a deep evidence-based intervention. And so we meet them where they are, work with them no matter what their trauma, no matter what's going on in their lives. And we provide 21 different services that could help them. We're kind of one-stop shop.
Wow. And you meet them where they are. If I'm jumping in, like, what do you mean meet? Like, are you, like, how are you finding kids that have problems? I mean, obviously they're in an impoverished area. It's obvious, but how does that work?
Yeah, you know, again, as we do work in 3 states, we impact over 4,000 lives plus their families every single year and growing. I think the bigger thing is we work with partner organizations, school systems, community neighborhoods, other organizations that serve at-risk youth but don't do what we do, juvenile justice systems, the child welfare system, you know, the word foster care. Not everybody knows what that is. But, you know, in the foster care system, we work with a lot of children.
Okay.
In foster care, generally people that are on the poverty spectrum and are Medicaid eligible.
Okay. And so talk about some of the services you offer, if you can, just pick out a few.
Yeah, high-level foster care. We're the largest private foster care agency in the Carolinas. We license and support foster homes from the coast to the mountains. We work with children in the foster care system in South Carolina and the state of Florida. We do early childhood education and in a very poor area of Charlotte to bring a high-quality child education center to a poverty-stricken community. We do mental health, both psychiatric residential services and in-home and in-school services. So we just do a plethora of different things. There's almost no behavioral or social need that we can't meet as it pertains to children 0 to 8.
Talk about foster care, because I think it's one of those things where people hear about it. They'll hear about celebrities getting involved in it, and it's like I know it's a form of adoption. But can you just explain how it works? Like, who are these kids and how long is fostership work going on? Can you just give us a little background?
Yeah, I mean, it's different in different places. Just to boil it down to a simplest form, children are removed from their caregiver, predominantly mom and or dad. Could be grandparents or family members, and they're brought into the custody of the state. And through that, the state works with private agencies and public agencies to identify appropriate family-like placements for them, generally which would be foster families. It could be me or you. In our families, we go through a rigorous background screening process and training And then we say, hey, we want to care and love on these kids like they're our own, but they're not our own.
Right.
In foster. Now, eventually that could become an adoptive placement and an actual adoption.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, it's understanding that that child should, with the right interventions, go back home to their family.
And tell us about that gap in between the being removed from a home to being put in a home. Where are they in between that?
Sometimes they're in a group home. Unfortunately, big thing going on now, depending on the age and their behavioral issues. Sometimes they could be placed in a social service or child welfare office with staffers. But what we try to do at our organization is grow foster care capacity to meet the needs, and we'd love to be of service. So if a child is removed, that we have a foster home available for them right then and there. But it's an appropriate placement that stays intact. So you got to take a lot of things into account. Just like anything else, you got to make sure the fit is right.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is re-traumatize children by putting them into a placement and then changing that placement again tomorrow. So you want to be very cognizant of that.
Yeah. And in terms of the issues we're facing today, and I don't know, and I talk about this a lot, I'm not sure if it's just because we're more aware of it because we just have so much information in our hand. I like to say, like, our brains are not developed enough to handle all the information we have access to. I just don't think it's possible. But I feel like there's more and more problems with children, whether it's physical, mental. Is it? Or maybe we're just more aware of it now? Because I almost feel like there's more dietary issues than when I was a little kid, more mental health issues than I was a kid. Is it? Or is it just we just have more information for this?
It's exacerbated. There's a lot more going on. I mean, the pandemic did no good for the at-risk youth population, for sure. I mean, it didn't do good for my own kids. I mean, I have a child that was in kindergarten when we went home in 20, early 20, that was just learning how to read. It took him a year and a half just to get back on the grade level. And he had supports, 2 parents that love and care for him. We were able to get him tutoring and all the things that a lot of children don't have access to, and he still struggled to get back on track. So you imagine if you don't have the support systems around you. Technology is another thing. I mean, it's hard to believe that the iPhone is not even, 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
It seems like it's been around for 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I had a pager and a damn illegal pad. So life has changed in a lot of ways, and I don't think it's helped. Too much information, there's a lot out there as it pertains to children. There's a lot of good, but there's a lot of bad. And the bigger problem for us, and my approach to our work is everything begins and ends with leadership. So a lot of the problems that we see going on in our communities, in our states, in our schools, in my mind, is a major leadership gap. We can innovate and change, but at the end of the day, what's the differentiator? We want to bring good, solid leadership principles and leadership practices so we can really start solving problems, not putting Band-Aids on them.
Since you're in this space, I'm curious, how does politics, factor in? Because I feel like leadership has become polarized. Like you and I are both old enough to remember, like, the president of the United States was this esteemed individual that was revered, and you would see late night comics take little pot shots and jokes, but like the idea of where we are now, where we are with our leaders, and I'm obviously going to the top, but you could just that dribbles down. So how does the political climate, just the social aspect of leadership, whereas like you said, a leader was like the person at the top, and then everything would trickle down, but like now all of a sudden it's sort of trickling up. And then all of a sudden we're shitting on the person that's on the top. Tell me how that plays into what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think as somebody that's walked through the halls, in the Capitol in D.C., all the way to Raleigh, Columbia, Tallahassee, and many other state capitals, we have to understand that generally time you're in there, you're trying to lobby for something. You're going to spend some time with it, to your point, a 20-year-old staffer. You're going to get about 15 minutes, or you might actually meet a legislator that happens to be on a committee that's driving a policy that's going to impact your work or impact children and families, and you're going to get about 3 minutes of their time. So I think what's interesting for me is they're operating on tidbits of information that come at a rapid pace, almost like social media, but in person. And a lot of times it's who's the loudest and who has the deepest pocket is going to give the biggest influence. So unfortunately, and I think I could say this a little bit more being in my 50s and kind of peeling out of this zone, a lot of policy decisions are being made about industries, not just mine, but industries in general from the top. If I ran my business like that, nobody would work for me. Right? You need to talk to the people that are in the work, garner their feedback, hear from them. They know what the problems are, and they really also know what the solutions to those problems are. The problem with politics in general, and again, it correlates to bad leadership, is you don't take the time to really understand and talk to people closer to the problems and help them inform your solution. You have somebody in your ear, chirping in your ear, or telling you what the solution is. In most cases, those people have never even been near that problem they're talking about. And it's sad. In the end, our communities struggle. Like, why haven't we solved these problems?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 31 years. Why haven't we solved these problems?
And the reason I bring this up is the fact that your problem and the problem that we're all going to be impacted by is it's not a sexy problem.
No.
Like, if you ask, I love this, I bring this up all the time, but in New Hampshire before the primary, they asked people from New Hampshire, what is your number one concern? And they said immigration. And I'm like, you live in freaking New Hampshire. Immigration is not your problem. It's because it's played out on TV that, and obviously it is. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but like in New Hampshire, really? Is that your number one problem? It's probably like, children not eating or the issue. So how do you combat that? How do you combat the fact that your problem is not going to get someone elected? Whereas, it probably, but it doesn't.
Yeah, no, I think there was a point in time when I got the Thompson 7 years ago, I thought we were going to go out and be major change agents in kind of the macro of the way it works. And what ends up happening is you just get real frustrated. I think it's just important that we understand that it's the lack of focus on these problems create the issue. And it's not just the political, what people think. It's also the money, how the funding flows. Again, is if we threw everything at something, couldn't we solve it?
Yeah.
The problem is we don't throw everything at it. You kind of salt, pepper, or a little peanut butter here and there. And by the time you spread it all over the bread, you can't taste it at all.
Yeah.
And I think, philanthropy has a role to play in that. I think corporate social responsibility has a role to play in that. And somebody that works for government, I don't think government they're not in the best position to solve these problems.
Yeah.
And I think some of it goes back to leadership. I can go back to, I was interviewed for the job to run the child welfare system here in South Carolina years ago. And I was living in Charlotte. The first thing I said, do I have to move to Columbia? They said, yes. I said, I'm out. My wife's not going to live in Columbia. But then I said, yeah, all kidding aside, I said, how much money in your budget do you dedicate toward leadership development? And you know what the answer was?
Zero.
Goose egg.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So how does that work? How do you lead through something?
Yeah.
A problem that really has not had a solution and invest zero into the development of your leaders. Sorry, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, that's why we're not talking problems. I'm hoping that's changed. That was about 6 years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago. And I know that the leadership here is doing some really good stuff, and they've got some good leadership in place, but that's inappropriate on some.
And on the subject of leadership, you're in our Forbes Books offices in downtown Charleston to begin your authority journey. What is it that you have to offer? I mean, obviously you got the receipts. You've been doing this for quite a while, but for folks that, will be, eventually you'll be writing a book, doing some work. What do you think you have to offer? What's your difference maker?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a true difference maker. I think the way I look at the work is different. So, one of the things that we're really excited about is how do you scale what many people call a not-for-profit. Not-for-profit is not an aspirational goal. That's a tax status.
Right.
That's not an outcome. And I said essentially 50% of for-profits aren't profitable. So why are we calling them non-for-profit?
Yeah.
And where there are actually functioning non-for-profits that grow and scale and actually make a little bit of money at the end of the year, we invest back into their mission. So I think some of that is how do we get other organizations like ours, because you can't have one organization do it all. You can't have 5 or 6. You have many organizations strong to really scale and be sustainable to really impact community. So that's one big part of me just sharing the story, what's worked in our organization. So we've grown 20% year over year for the last 7 years. Interesting enough, when I say 20%, it's 20% of the people that we're impacting. It's also 20% of our overall revenue. And that's really important. So how do you bring big business principles to the non-for-profit sector? And I would even say to the social sector in general, including the public sector, all on the foundation of what leadership needs to be looking like. So I think that's a big part of what my story is. The other thing is really challenging the role of philanthropy to help solve problems. I think there needs to be a reckoning for philanthropy to really invest in what works. Yes, I know it feels really good to save the day, but most organizations that you're paying dollars to save the day, they're actually declining in their impact. They're literally running backwards, and we're on mission. That means we're moving forward. We're walking into profit. We're walking into communities. And I think there's other organizations like us, and philanthropy needs to start looking at that from a different lens. And not just say, hey, we want to give you dollars and resources because we don't want you to go out of business. Well, there's a reason they're at risk of going out of business.
Yeah.
Don't fuel that fire. It's not going to help the community. It's not going to help children. It's not going to help families. So that, I think that's part of the story that I tell, trying to get leaders to think about their work in a different way. Try to lead, be a leader, not a friend. What I like to say, most of what I learned about leadership is wrong. Thank God I finally realized what good looks like, and is really trying to work hard to apply that and teach our leaders how to.
When did you realize that, you said all the stuff you learned about leadership was wrong. When did you realize that you were on the right track? Were there any kind of aha moments where like, oh shit, I've finally got this thing being a leader?
Well, now, I mean, a lot of times people feel like they're being a good leader because the people that they're leading are happy, but the reason that they're happy is because you're doing a job for them. I think what we needed, just like in my journey with authority, I need help. And I can't assume that I'm the expert in what that looks like. I have to defer to the experts like Forbes Books and others to tell me and to lead me. I have to be coachable at all times as a leader. And I think in leadership, one of the first things we did is we went out and sought help and brought in an organization. They introduced us something called the Leadership Pipeline. Ram Shamram was a big author there. And that's really talks about leading up level. There's a difference between an individual contributor, a leader of others, and a leader of leaders, and a functional leader, and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And then you get to be like me, a CEO. My coach says, your job is to do absolutely nothing. I'm like, how does that work? How do I do nothing when everything that I've accomplished in life has been working my ass off? But the reality of that advice, it really does sound advice. What he means is I should not be doing the busy work of an individual contributor or leader of others. I need to be doing a different type of lifting, vision casting, multi-million-dollar business development opportunities, mergers and acquisitions. That's where I need to be swimming. I need to be working on the organization, not in it as a CEO. And I think that was an eye-opener for me because when I was a leader of others and a leader of leaders, I was like, oh, man, you're stressed out. Let me do the job for you.
Yeah.
And that's inappropriate. But in the moment, it feels good because they're really happy that I'm doing their job for them. But what am I doing? I'm taking away an opportunity for them to learn and for them to make mistakes and them to have opportunities to grow. So that was a big aha moment about 5 years ago in our organization. And we've continued to kind of take on that mantra of leading at level. Every leadership role only has 5 core behaviors, and it's different. An individual contributor has 5 core different behaviors than a leader of others. A leader of others has different behaviors than a leader of leaders. And by the way, you don't go from an individual to be a leader of leaders overnight. So we've set parameters and boundaries. We've coached, we've trained, we've implemented good individual coaching where people understand that it's a process. You don't become a good leader because you were a sharp individual contributor fresh out of college and you're super bright. You've been doing what you're doing for a year.
Yeah.
No, it's going to take about 10,000 hours. Isn't that what Malcolm Gladwell said? Well, that's the equivalent of about 4 years. So we'll expose you to leadership, but you're not going to be in leadership because you're not ready to be in leadership. Worst thing we could do ever is put somebody in a leadership role and they're not ready for it. What's going to happen? They're going to lead poorly. People underneath them are going to run for the hills. So we started really kind of honing in on that. And that's been a real key for us. It's not doing the job. It's really challenging people. Asking questions, not telling. That's what the Socratic coaching method's about.
Sure.
Let them solve their own problems. So we train our leaders and even tellers like me learn to ask more questions. So people can really buy into their own solutions.
Let me ask you about CEO of a nonprofit. Is it the same as a for-profit company? Is it different? I mean, obviously you stated a couple of things you did, but I mean, essentially it's what a for-profit CEO does. But tell me about that.
At some level, I would say maybe even a little bit more difficult. But I don't know necessarily if that's the case or right. I mean, it's the same function.
Yeah.
I was in something called Vistage. Have you ever?
Sure. Yeah.
Speakers is back. Yep. And one of the things that I really love, facetious, is like, here's Will. He's our not-for-profit guy.
Yeah.
So what I like to say is I am a CEO that runs a not-for-profit, not a not-for-profit CEO.
Mm.
And I think that's different because the way I aspire to lead is one that we actually increase our impact, but we also increase our margin. So that means inherently we're not a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
We're actually a mission-based for-profit. Love to see the 501c3 has to be mission-based for-profit.
Yeah.
And then there could be also not-for-profits, and that could be regular business that are not tax status,
right,
that aren't making money.
Got it.
But we want to be a mission-based for-profit.
Can you explain for me, for the uneducated, me personally,
Sure.
Nonprofit profit? You mentioned the fact that it's basically like tax codes, because I always found it silly because I think people who are maybe not in the space, like, oh, nonprofit, so no one's making any money, everyone's a volunteer. It's all just charitable people doing that. And obviously it's not the case. But so can you just give us a breakdown in terms of like the major differences between a nonprofit and a profit?
Yeah, I mean, but before I do, my wife and I were at a bar during the NCAA tournament years ago, and we're sitting there, and I'm watching my alma mater. They happen to be playing Duke in the first round.
So you lost?
We did. It was second game of the first round. Actually, it was a close game. We had a big 7'6" guy by the name of Taco Fall. I don't know.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Taco. Everybody's shaking his head. I know Taco.
Yeah.
So it was funny, and we're talking a conversation. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I have to stop saying this, but the first thing comes to my mouth, I run a not-for-profit, and oh man, let me buy you guys beer. I'm like, no, man, I could actually buy my own beer. Well, matter of fact, let me buy you a beer.
Yeah.
Like, we do okay.
Yeah.
I always just think that's funny because that's just the assumption that people make. They're running multi-million-dollar organizations. I was a CEO of a $330 million annual organization. I'm the CEO of a $50 million organization that's 500 employees in 3 states and growing. So I shouldn't be making peanuts.
Yeah.
It's a difficult job. It's no less difficult than any other CEO role. I think the biggest thing is intent. We're for-profits. Forget about the taxes. Just throw it out the window. For-profits have their primary goal inherently is to make money.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's another problem. People think there's something wrong with that. It's completely okay to make money. We have for-profit organizations come in, B2B partners, try to pitch me, and like, it's okay for you guys to make profit. You guys, that's what you do. And what we do is make impact. The goal is to make impact, not to make profit. Now, good not-for-profits will make both. Thompson's good enough.
I love that. He's Will Jones, President and CEO of Thompson Child and Family Focus, and that'll do it for this Forbes Books podcast. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, or Instagram at Joe Partivilla or TikTok at J Partivilla. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.